Yo, what's up? We out here yet again, Goriako, taking a step ahead into the study of the book of Lamentations. And I'm not gonna lie, this book is a great book, don't get me wrong, but it's a hard study. And I think because of that, it's made me a little bit, how do I put it? Because it's a difficult study, I almost feel like I'm less inclined to study it consistently because it's hard to really get something from it with a cursory or just an overview kind of a look. So I've been sitting on this particular video for a while, these verses here. And the interesting part about that is I think that these particular verses that I'll cover in this video might be the most inspiring and most positive and most well-known section of this book. So it's a little bit interesting to have the hang up with talking about this, given how much more doom and gloom and destruction and despair is covered in the rest of the book. So it's interesting, but we're going to get into it here today. Lamentations 3, starting with verses 19 and going through, I think, verse 26 or 27. We'll see where we stop. It's a chunk, but I'll put the questions down below in the description that I like to use when it comes to Bible study on a practical level, how we can really relate to it and get something that we can actually apply to our lives down there. So check those out. And anytime that you go through studying the Bible, use those questions as like a little guide. It's one of many different productive ways that you can study the Bible and get something meaningful for yourself. I prayed before getting on this one, so we're going to jump right in. And to just give you a short recap up to this point, and feel free to check the other Lamentations videos. There should be a playlist of them now in order. But this book is kind of written in response to and in the midst of the destruction of Jerusalem. And by extension, the destruction of Israel and their culture, their people, because of how they view Jerusalem in particular. If Jerusalem would have made it through the siege, then Israel would have been okay. And as a nation, they would have had a lot of confidence in their livelihood and their future. But because of what happened to Jerusalem here, the people are destroyed. That was like the creme de la creme, the pride and joy of the Israelite nation was Jerusalem, the temple, and the ambiance of what happened there in that city. And Jeremiah is talking about the destruction not only from the Israelite side, but also from his own personal side. And you see this struggle, this wrestling with God, and this there's a real difficulty in understanding what the relationship with God is supposed to look like from the perspective that Jeremiah brings out here. And he even shows his own struggle as the prophet of God, as the man of God. He shows his own struggle that he has with God, relating to God within the midst of all this stuff going on. But we do see the accountability, and I think that's the turning point that helps you see, okay, yeah, I'm expressing these things, and this is a reflection of how I feel right now, but there's something deeper that I understand about what's going on that's helping me relate to this thing better. And I think that that's encapsulated right here in the middle of chapter 3, starting with verse 19. Remember my affliction and roaming, the wormwood and the gall, the bitterness. He's talking about remembering. But he's talking about remembering this bitterness and remembering the affliction, remember the roaming, the thing that has cast him out from his own home. The wormwood. I think this is something that they would ground up and put in water. Don't quote me on it, but it's like, shoot, I think I talked about this last time and watching some video on different religions and cults and stuff where they put this poison in this thing and the people had to drink it and they'd be throwing up all over the place. I don't know if that's what wormwood is, but that's always the image that comes to mind when I hear it. But he's saying, remember all of this stuff. And in verse 20, he's going to say, remember again, but in a very different way and for a very different purpose. Verse 20, my soul still remembers and sinks within me. Verse 21, this I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. Whoa, I'm getting chills, like goosebumps, just with the utterance of that word after everything that we've seen happen to this part in Lamentations. The first 3.5 chapters have literally been the worst graphic pictures of what could happen between people being strewn all over the streets. You don't have your future anymore. Everything is death, doom, and gloom. It's done. And despite all of this poison and affliction that the prophet is remembering, he's saying there's something else that I remember. There's something else that I'm recalling to my mind, so that despite all of this, I still have hope. Now, for me, maybe another reason I'm getting the goosebumps and saying that is, we go through a lot of crap. Thought about using a different word there. We go through a lot of crap in life. Everybody. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what class you might be from. It doesn't matter what country. It doesn't matter what background, culture, what status you feel you are. Everybody's gone through some junk. Everybody. What comes to your mind when you're in those moments? For a lot of us, we get stuck there in the, man, why me? This really sucks. And unfortunately, for some people, it becomes unbearable to the point that they don't want to exist anymore. But you have these different things that you can do when you get to this point that is so low. It says, my soul still remembers all of these things and sinks within me, but there's another memory that comes from being at the bottom down there. And I think this right here is, to me, one of the most important and valuable things about a relationship with God. When you get down there at the bottom of the barrel and you have nothing and you feel like you are nothing, there's somebody who's still there in the midst of that with you when you feel like no one else is there and that you've lost everything else that you had. And that's God. I mentioned earlier before about people who get into these situations of such despair that they feel they have no choice. Like, you talk about a desperate and despairing situation and place. To be in a place where you feel so low that you feel like you have nothing else to hold on to and that you're completely so very alone. It's sad. And even it's just sad. It's sad. And it's depressing and it's discouraging you feel for people who are in situations like that. And yet, if you have a relationship with God, you get down there in those places and you're not alone. It's not just you. God is still there fighting with you, crawling with you. And if we have that relationship, if we trust that despite all the crap that we go through, God is still a God of relationship who wants to be there with us in the midst of that, we too can have hope in those darkest of times. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. Verse 22. Verse 22, through the Lord's mercies, we are not consumed. We're still here. Things are bad and we're going through hell, but guess what? We are still here. Through the Lord's mercies, we are not consumed because his compassions fail not. When we go through these hard times, God's mercies are still with us. He's still feeling with us, compassion, feeling with us, going through it with us. He feels all of that. We're not alone. We're not alone. And his compassions fail not. In other words, you can't get to a low enough point that God will say he's not going to be with you anymore. It doesn't matter how low you get. He's still there. His compassion will not fail. He will be with you as low as you go. He is there. It's not that he's not there when we get to certain points. It's oftentimes that because of ourselves, the things that we choose to look at instead, we don't see him anymore. But he's there. He's there. Verse 23, They are new every morning. These, we get this description of what Jeremiah is going through and what the people of Israel are going through in all of their loss. And yet they're not consumed. God's compassions, they don't fail, and they're renewed every morning. It's not something that gets old, and it's not something that he gets tired of. It's something that he's renewing on our behalf every single day. That's powerful. He says, they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Everything can be going to hell. Everything about life can be getting turned upside down from what we know and getting turned upside down from whatever we know. But God is still faithful to be with us and to renew that compassion that he feels towards us, no matter what we are going through every day. It's amazing to think of. And at the same time, I think of what kind of despair would somebody be in who doesn't have a friend like that, who doesn't have a relationship with somebody like that. It's amazing. You heard the description of what happened in Lamentations. Like, it's bad. It's brutal. What if you had to go through that without a friend, without a relationship that you could count on? That'd really suck. It'd be the worst of the worst. Verse 24, the Lord is my portion, therefore I hope in him. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. That soul that still remembers and sinks within me, still knows that it's hanging on to, with the tightest and maybe even the weakest of grips, it's still holding on to the fact that God is my portion. Therefore I will hope in him. That little piece, that little piece of hope that you have, it's still worth grasping onto. With two hands, with two fingers, whatever you can, hold on to that. Verse 25, the Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. Verse 26, it is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. I get chills again in thinking about that, because we don't like to wait. We would prefer that the things we want, we get right now. Especially in today's day and age, where it's easier than ever to get rich quick. Anytime you go on social media, you see how easy it is to make the money, or to get this or to get that, or achieve this or achieve that. It could be exercise. There was some dude who just got busted recently about his six-pack abs, something being a fraud or something like that. I don't remember. But there's so many people out there trying to sell this impatience, and they're capitalizing on it, that we want something right now and we don't want to put the work in for it. We don't want to wait for anything. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, but we don't like to wait. And in the time of waiting is often the time of soul seeking, soul searching. That's what verse 25 is telling us. And there's some wisdom there, because when we take a moment to pause and to take a step back, then we can actually evaluate what's going on. Then we can actually think about what's meaningful for us and how we may have opportunity to grow. What's the learning edge? How can we improve in the situation? I'm always reminded in these things about my brother and his encouragement to me when I was telling him about, man, like, nothing's going my way. It seems like this is out to get me and this is out to get me. And he said, well, stop looking externally and look within. Stop trying to wish everything else would change and see how you can change and be better despite whatever's going on. If you never take the moment to step back from that, you never gain that insight, that valuable insight. But we don't like to wait. We don't like to seek. We want to be spoon-fed whatever it is and just hope it works out for the best. We don't want to hope and wait quietly. We want it right now. And I feel that when I think of the situation that my mom is in, going on. She's just been transferred to another hospital now, or another facility, going on 30 plus days. I want her to be better now, today. And I don't want her to have to deal with this anymore. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for that. It's hard. And yet I read something like this. For as rough as the situation is for me and my family, I can't say that it was worse than what the Israelites dealt with back then, with their entire nation and country being destroyed. And yet in spite of that, the man of God who had a relationship with God says, I'll wait on him. And I'll search out my own heart in the meantime. I'm going to trust in that. It's a test of patience, and we hate being patient. And everything about today's day and age makes it harder to be patient than ever before. We don't want to study anything. It doesn't matter, whatever field you're in, there's somebody trying to get it done quick. And if it's a job that has to do with work and patience and time, people don't want to do it. They want to, whatever it is, they want to get it done quicker. They don't want to wait. It's amazing. Verse 27, it is good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth. I don't know how old Jeremiah was when he wrote this. He may not have been young at all, but he's still bringing up a valuable principle that if you can learn, what's this bear the yoke that he's talking about, and bearing it early on? Well, it's what he just said. Trusting in God, understanding that you can hope in God, to be patient, to learn to delay gratification, to figure out how to hope, to do the soul searching of self. All of these are the yoke that it's good for a man to bear and a woman to bear in your youth. And if you can learn that, well, shoot, maybe we'd be able to deal with the same thing that Jeremiah is dealing with in this description of the destruction of his people and his nation. What could a relationship with God do for us on a practical level? That's a practical thing that he's going through right now. He's not saying, this is going to make me feel better. Like, people are dying. The nation has been destroyed. He's talking about something very practical, a mindset that he's going to have that is a benefit to him in this moment. Now, you think about your moment. You think about the difficulty, the challenges, the family members, the struggles, the despair, the death, whatever it might be. You think about those things. I think about them, and it's like, man, do I have a relationship with somebody who can help me in a practical way to deal with those things better, to respond better, and to become better despite that? I believe that's what Jeremiah is talking about here. We have to look at it. And I'm not just saying you don't feel, because in the verse it said to feel. The Lord's compassions fail not. They are new every morning. So there needs to be that renewal of that. But the feeling of compassion and identifying with those things and reacting in a very real way to the pain and the hurt that we feel doesn't need to be separate from the learning and the growing that we can have as well. I think sometimes we tend to do that for people who say, and you do have, I will say, to be fair, you do have both extremes. You have people who want to sit in that pain and sit in that anguish, and they just want to be there. And they don't want to learn to grow or to see any kind of silver lining from a situation, and I can understand that. And on the other end, you have people who don't want to feel anything at all. They just look at it completely from an analytical perspective and, well, what's my level up here? What's the game? I would suggest that maybe what Jeremiah is talking about here is finding the balance between the two, where you can feel and understand and relate to it and connect to what's happening and still grow in spite of that. That's the picture that I get. And I think that's a very practical mentality that anybody could benefit from today. There's a quote here. There's a couple different quotes that are kind of interspersed within my Bible here. And this one says, trials well born develop character. None who receive God's word are exempt from difficulty and trial. But when affliction comes, the true Christian does not become restless, distrustful, or despondent. Remembering the tender mercies of the Lord, we should cast our care upon him and with patience wait for his salvation. It's not about like something happens and we start running around with our heads cut off, scared and whatever. Yeah, we might be a little bit fearful, but we have something that trumps that fear. We have God. We have a relationship with him. And it helps to quiet and still that fear if we're willing to wait patiently for him. And on a practical level, sometimes responding in fear and kind of this, I don't know why rabbit is the word that came to my mind, but in this kind of franticness, right? We see people respond in fear like that sometimes. You can actually do yourself more harm than good. I remember a time, this was in the age of always needing to have a toothpick. I was with one of my boys in the dorm, undergrad. I had a plastic fork that I had bitten off one of the tongs, and I was using it as a toothpick. Plastic, a hard fork. And we were laughing and joking about something, and I laughed apparently so hard that I inhaled the tongue of the fork. And I remember how, thankfully, I've had a few moments like this in my life. It felt like everything slowed down. And I was thinking, okay, how am I going to get this thing out of my throat? Like, I could feel it down here. It was in there. I was like, how am I going to get this thing out of here? And I remember thinking, well, I can't swallow because if I contract my throat, I'll probably puncture it. And even if I do swallow that, what's going to happen to that thing going through my digestive system? I'm going to have to get this thing out. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to have to cough. Well, to cough and to generate the air pressure coming out, I'm going to have to breathe in. How do I do that? All without constricting my what do you call this thing? Windpipe or whatever, air pipe, I don't know. So I had to really slow down. And at the same time, while I'm kind of putting up my hand to my friend and trying to communicate, give me a second, I got something in my throat. I'm like breathing in slowly through my nose and then trying to cough again without restricting my windpipe. I don't know. So if you know what it's called, let me know down below. I can't remember. But a couple coughs and I was able to cough it out. Not only was I supremely grateful, thank God for that, but again, I just thought, man, what if I just kind of freaked out and maybe grabbed my throat or something? I could have caused a lot more pain and a lot more hurt in a rough situation by being impatient and by reacting very quickly. So there are plenty of other practical situations and probably more life and death situations that could be benefited by us pausing in the moment and not rushing to respond. We may create more harm and more problems than good and benefit. So it's interesting. The quote finishes out by saying this: through conflict, the spiritual life is strengthened. Trials, well born, will develop steadfastness of character and precious spiritual graces. That's something practical. The perfect fruit of faith, meekness and love, often matures best amid storm clouds and darkness. Whoa. So what are we trying to do? We trying to level up or not? We can't run from the storm then. We have to embrace it and go through it. I saw this reel on Instagram probably a month or so ago now, but it was talking about this bison that when a storm is coming, it doesn't run away from the storm like the rest of the animals do. It actually turns and walks straight into it because that's the quickest way through the storm. It's a strange concept to think of, but if you embrace that, not only do you potentially make it through faster, but you spend less time with the franticness of trying to avoid it. Amazing. But we don't like that because we don't want to be patient. We don't want to struggle through that stuff. We want stuff served up on a silver platter to us right here, right now. Keep it pushing, call it a day. It's not that easy. And if it is that easy, we're probably not growing. So I don't know. I don't know. And mind you, I'm not saying that just because I understand this, I'm like, all right, let me just embrace like that's still a struggle for me. I'm trying to see what I can learn in my situation with my mom and with other things going on in life right now, but it's hard. It's hard. But I still got a little bit of hope. And this I recall in my mind, therefore I have hope. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed. Because his compassions fail not, they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Albeit a small portion. But because of that, therefore I hope in him. So I'm going to take what the prophet said and pray that I can experience the reality, the applicability, the practicality of this in my life. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Oftentimes you'll get to the point where it feels like your only option is to count on God. And sometimes that last option was the best option all along. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll catch you in the next one, all right? Hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to spend some time reflecting on this. But until then, peace.